And welcome back, everybody, to the Daily 8. I'm so excited for this next segment. If you already love everything about the Daily 8 as much as I do, well, then you're very excited to know that we're only getting more expansive with it as far as the types of topics and the type of people that we are inviting onto the Daily 8. And that includes, starting today, we are bringing a new segment. It will be a semi-regular segment here on the Daily 8 with Tracy Brame of Cooley Law School. She's going to be in on a regular basis to go over the legal and law side of a lot of the top stories that we talk about ad nauseum here at News 8, whether it be local, national, or even international. Tracy is a great addition to the News 8 team and, of course, the Daily 8 to provide a lot of extra additional context to the story, and that includes this very first segment that we're so excited to share with everybody. It has all to do with the recent arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. Without further ado, here is that first segment with Tracy Brame. Tracy, it is so great to have you on today. Thank you so much for stopping by as we get set for a brand new chapter here on the Daily 8. We are going to be inviting you on in a more regular capacity to kind of go a little bit deeper into some of the top law stories that we've been following here at News 8, and we're so glad to have you on as part of the Daily 8 now. So thank you so much for stopping by today.
Well, thank you for having me, and I am so excited about this new endeavor. So I appreciate you inviting me.
Absolutely. You know, everybody watching, you're going to be seeing Tracy a little bit more often. Just to give a little bit of background, she is a professor and an associate dean over at the Cooley Law School in Lansing. You've probably seen her on our newscast before. She provides such great insight. And again, I think being able to sit down with her and actually spend a little bit more extra time talking about some of these top stories is going to be really beneficial, not just to us here at News 8, but to you guys at home as well. So, Tracy, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into this first segment, if you don't mind. It's one of the biggest stories, really, in quite some time, and definitely the biggest story of 2026 so far. And that, of course, has to do with everything going on regarding the Venezuela situation. Just to catch everyone up on what we know for sure right now. Again, this has been a topic of discussion for some time. Back earlier this year, on January 2nd, U.S. troops traveled to Caracas, Venezuela, and took Venezuela President Nicolás Maduro and his wife into custody. They have been taken to court in New York, and Maduro and his wife, along with several others, have been charged with narco-terrorism. And that's kind of what I want to first spend a little bit of time talking about, Tracy, if you don't mind. A lot of discussion has been about the legality behind the United States doing something like this, the Trump administration's ability to go into another sovereign country and take its leader. People have been talking about, is this something that the United States is allowed to do? How far is the president allowed to do this without maybe consulting with Congress or other branches of government? I mean, if you wouldn't mind, this is a big loaded question, Tracy, but I mean, is this legal? I mean, can you kind of just explain a little bit more about the details behind something like this?
Well, people far above my pay grade have opinions, right, on both sides
Right.
about the legality of this operation, but I can certainly talk a little bit about what I think might come out as explanations for why our government did what it did,
Hmm.
and its thoughts about the basis or legal basis for doing so. So I think your instinct is right, and I think that the incident that occurred a few days ago caught a lot of us by surprise, and our
Hmm.
instinct is. How can you just go into someone else's country and kind of snatch them out of their home and bring them over for prosecution even if they've been indicted here, right? Because
Hmm.
there's a sense that even if you're charged with something, right, in a jurisdiction, generally the government can't pluck you from another jurisdiction, right, to
Right.
come in and bring you in to face charges. I don't know if you remember kind of the old movies or TV shows where someone's running from the law and they're driving away and they're trying to get across the county line, right? Because they know if they can get across the county line, they're scot free because the people from the prior county can't come get them, right? So it's a similar idea
Hmm.
that in order to bring someone over for prosecution, you either have to have the cooperation, right, of their country, or some kind of extradition order, right? Something formal to allow you to bring them over. In this case, we did not have any of those things, right? Our government took it upon themselves to go and arrest Maduro and his wife. And the reasoning seems to be that this was a legitimate law enforcement
Hmm.
operation. And so I know we'll talk in a few minutes about precedent, right, that we have in this country for this kind of operation. But to the extent that President Trump and his administration have offered explanations, it seems to be around the fact that there was and is an indictment
Hmm.
against Mr. Maduro, and the FBI went over there to arrest him. Okay. And, we'll talk about the Panama incident from 1989, kind of the last time that there's an example that's akin to this, where we did something
Mhm.
like this. And there was a legal opinion then from then Assistant Attorney General Bill Barr that basically said, international law aside, the president has the right to enforce US law, right,
Mhm.
in foreign countries, even if the methods for doing so contravene customary international law, right? And the basis for that opinion is that we can't always count on the other government. So if you think about a
Mhm.
situation like this, if you say, well, you have to get consent from the Venezuelan government in order to go in and get Mr. Maduro, you have to get an extradition order. Well, of course, President Maduro is not going to give his consent, right?
Right.
And if you believe that there might be a basis for these charges, these narco terrorism, drug trafficking charges, then the question becomes, does the government, have to sit and wait for approval
Mhm.
before enforcing our law, even if we think that the actions of the Maduro administration were dangerous or against American interests. And in this case, right, President Trump and his administration decided that they did not need the Venezuelan government's approval, the UN
Mhm.
Security Council approval, or even Congress's approval to execute, law enforcement function, the FBI going to pick up someone who's been indicted on felony charges.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I want to spend some time now kind of shifting back. You touched on it a little bit back in the 80s, what the situation down in Panama when Manuel Noriega was taken from Panama and then brought to the United States to face charges as well. I mean, there is sort of a precedent like this. I mean, if you wouldn't mind maybe explaining a little bit about that situation for some of our viewers that maybe weren't around back then to really remember, or maybe have never heard of that situation before, what happened there? And then also, I mean, does that kind of spell out maybe what we might be seeing with this case with Maduro now?
Exactly. Yeah. So I was pretty young when that happened myself. So that was quite a while ago. Um,
Right.
that we
Three
invaded,
decades at this point, yeah.
exactly, that we invaded Panama. But as I was saying, that the memo that was written by Bill Barr was written in part to support President Bush's actions, right? In
Mhm.
that instance, we had another layer though there that's not necessarily present here, which was in that case, Panama had actually declared hostilities, declared war. Like we actually had a conflict with the Panamanian government.
Mhm.
We had been trying to resolve that conflict, et cetera, without success. There was a Marine that had been killed in some hostilities. And so finally, President Bush, relying on Bill Barr's legal opinion, and also, right, also this notion of under international law, typically and very broadly, you can go in and conduct an operation like this, right, in self-defense, right? So again, you could have the consent of the government, you could have UN Security Council approval, or if you can claim that your actions are in self-defense, you're defending the interests of your country from imminent danger, right? Then maybe there's an argument. So President Bush, argued that of course the hostilities that were happening, the Marine that was killed, Manuel Noriega's belligerence, all of those things gave him the right to go in and capture him. Uh, so, of course, we don't necessarily have that here. And even then, President Bush's actions were pretty controversial, right? Because again, we went into another sovereign nation and arrested their leader and brought them here for prosecution. And one can imagine that could be a troubling precedent, right? Can you just go into any country
Mhm.
and capture their sovereign? So it was controversial even then. The Supreme Court, our courts have not weighed in officially on the legality of that. It became, in the end, more of a political matter, right, than the legal one. Because as we'll talk about, once Noriega was over here, he was subject, right, to the jurisdiction of our courts, and the same is going to be true for Maduro. So it became more of a political issue than a legal one back then. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out this time.
Right. Yeah. No. Definitely some similarities, but also some very big differences as well in both these different cases. Let's focus on the charges now that Maduro is facing. Again, I think a lot of people, if you ask them on the street right now that are familiar with the case, what is Maduro charged with? They'll tell you narco terrorism. That's the phrase that we've been hearing over and over again. What is narco terrorism, and can you explain a little bit more about what the prosecution is really kind of charging Maduro and his administration and all the others that have been charged kind of with?
Absolutely. So there's, there's a, oh, how many pages do I have here? There's a lengthy indictment, 25-page indictment against Maduro and against five others, right, including his wife. He and his wife were captured. His son is part of the indictment. He was not captured, but there are several counts. There's four main counts, and they involve conspiracy, right? So the six defendants are involved in conspiring to commit narco terrorism and drug trafficking and weapons possession, destructive weapons possession. And so essentially, the bottom line is our government is alleging that Maduro, throughout his time as president, and even before he was president, throughout his time in the Venezuelan government, has been supporting and facilitating drug trafficking, right? Using the power of his office, his agency, his control of government agencies to actually import dangerous narcotics into the United States. Right. So like I said, one of the counts is cocaine importation, a conspiracy to import cocaine, and then the narco terrorism comes into play with his partnership with other what our government has deemed terrorist organizations or gangs or drug organizations. His complicity with them, and kind of bringing those drugs over here. So.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, let's kind of, if you wouldn't mind, Tracy, let's kind of go into the prosecution side of things. It's already the story has become so much bigger than I think any of us could have really imagined, and we don't even have a trial really set yet at this time. The prosecution is going to have to prove these charges if Maduro is going to face prison time. How are they going to be looking to do that? I guess, how do you really, begin doing something like that at such a large scale with a different leader of a different country? I mean, how do you really even begin kind of shaping up that case?
Oh, I mean, it's going to be so interesting. Of course, there's a whole legal aspect of it, and then there's the political aspect of it.
Right.
So, what I don't want to get lost in this is that even Venezuelans are, there are many Venezuelans and Americans who are happy that Maduro's been captured. There's other people who see it as troubling. And so there's that whole side of things. Is he villain or political prisoner, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from a legal standpoint, the prosecutor's job is what their job always is, which is to take the counts, the charges one by one, and try to build a case. And I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. How do you do that? How do you even begin to do that with the evidence that you're gathering? Is kind of in this multinational, right? And so if you read the indictment, certainly there are allegations about things that are happening in Venezuela, but also, drugs being trafficked through other countries as well. And kind of how do you put those pieces together? But it's the same kind of fundamental building of a criminal case. You have witnesses, right, who can attest to the charges that you brought. Do you have documentation? Do you have, what kind of evidence that do you have? Because of course, Maduro has, he and his wife came into court and they both pled not guilty. He was pretty defiant and insisting that he was still the president of Venezuela, that he was not involved, that he is not guilty of these charges. And our criminal laws still require that the prosecutor prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that this person is guilty of those charges. So the criminal process will play out over probably a pretty long period of time.
Right.
I believe the next thing that will happen is maybe a scheduling conference where they'll even start to think about kind of what the cadence of the trial will be. Maduro has, and Barry Pollock, a very experienced lawyer who represented Julian Assange some years ago, and he will certainly, I'm sure, work to litigate some of these issues that we're talking about today. He may very well challenge the legality of Maduro's arrest in general, and will almost certainly raise defenses to his prosecution, including immunity of various sorts because of his status of head of state or because of acts done, official acts done during his presidency, et cetera. And it'll be interesting to see how all those, play out in court and what the judge does with those. But it'll be quite an intricate prosecution that I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about again.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is, again, I love this idea of having you on, Tracy, but I feel like this is going to be a topic that we're going to be spending quite a bit of time spending some time on as it kind of goes throughout the process. And that kind of leads me to this final question for you. I mean, we know that this is probably going to be a long time before we see any sort of real movement or really any sort of clear justification, or not justification, but a clear end to this whole case, I would say. But as far as the next steps, I mean, are we looking at maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months before we hear something? I mean, what is sort of, you mentioned a potential for a scheduling conference, maybe to sort of start laying out some of the plans to get this case moving forward. But I mean, how long could you possibly see this really going for?
I mean, this case could take years, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
Right.
so if you imagine a complex criminal drug conspiracy case involving Americans, right? That could take year, 2 years, right? Years to
Hmm.
go to trial. And here again, we have the whole political layer, the whole he's a sovereign of another country or a de facto sovereign of another country.
Right.
So again, from what I've read so far, in a few weeks, the judge has planned to bring the parties back in for a scheduling conference to again start to plan out what this might look like. But again, even in a typical criminal trial, even once you lay out a schedule, there are
Hmm.
adjournments, right? There are delays as people get. So, for example, the he has a very good defense attorney that will almost certainly want discovery, like want to know what the government has, what kind of documents, what kind of evidence, and he'll want to review that, like even that, like. Uh, uh, Conversations about that, litigation about what the government has to turn over, time for the defense counsel to consider that information,
Hmm.
decide what to do with it, motions to try to dismiss the charges. I mean, this is going to be a very long, drawn out process. Yeah, but like, so again, though, now that he's here, regardless of the legality of how he got here, there certainly is precedent to say that once he's here, he's going to have to face the charges. Um,
Right.
and kind of see what the government can prove.
All right. Well, again, we're going to be keeping a very close eye on this, and then we'll be sure to bring Tracy back in once we do get more developments. But Tracy, you're going to be joining us quite often now, going over a lot of the top law stories and providing a lot of context and much needed information. We're very excited to have you part of the Daily 8 team now. So Tracy, thank you so much. And this was a great first episode, I think.
Thank you so much.
And special thanks to Tracy Brame once again for stopping by. Again, this is going to become a more regular segment right here on the Daily 8, and we could not be more excited about that.